The Hadza people is an indigenous people in Tanzania. Today, some of them live traditionally as hunter-gatherers, while others have moved away from that way of living. We have as our guest Alyssa Crittenden.
Thank you so much. So nice to meet you, Leif, finally. I just would like to thank you for this opportunity, for this invitation to talk about the work that the community is doing, that I am very, very privileged to be invited to share in the work that they're doing. I am a professor of anthropology at my home institution at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And I earned my PhD in anthropology and my doctoral dissertation work many years ago, it feels like, nearly 20 years ago. I did research with the Hadza people, with the Hadzabe community as part of my doctoral dissertation research. And I first went to work with the community in 2004. And I have been working ever since. I started out doing traditional anthropological research, I would say. So questions that many anthropologists have been interested in for generations of academics, but are still interested in today. Questions in regard to diet, so kind of what foraging communities are eating, things like child rearing, social organization. These are things I was very interested in studying to learn more about the human condition and working in a population that at that time was still hunting and gathering for much of their diet. So much of the diet at that time was coming from wild foraged foods, which allowed me to ask certain types of questions. Over the years, over my continued interaction with community members, I began to have a change in terms of the way that I thought about my engagement with the community and my responsibility, not only as a scientist, but my responsibility as a person, as an ethical human being. And I began wanting to do research that would benefit the community directly. Not so much give back to the community, because I don't actually know if I will ever be able to give back to the community what they have given me. I think that's an impossible task. But I decided to dedicate the rest of my career to helping the community advance their own initiatives and use my own research power and my own status as an American scientist and professor to facilitate the work that they wanted to see done. So that is how I found myself in this place. My colleague and collaborator, Shani Msafiri Mangola, who hopefully will be able to join us soon, he is a member of the Hadza community, and I was very good friends with his father. And so that's kind of how that started. But as an anthropologist, so much of my work is now driven by questions the community would like to see answered. And my work as part of the mutual aid organization that Shani and I started together called Olanakwes Community Fund. The Hadza people, in their language, the way that they refer to themselves is Hadzabe. So the Hadzabe people, the Hadza community, they are historically, hunters have been hunters and gatherers, and they still identify as hunters and gatherers as part of their identity. Some of their, oh, I'm hoping my friend is on.
Hello, Shani. Alyssa was talking about the Hadza. Who are they? Where are they and how do they live? Maybe you can answer those questions.
Yeah, Hadza, they're available in the Arusha region, I mean northern side of Tanzania, like Arusha. I mean 4 regions: Arusha, Manyara region, and Singida, and also Meatu, in the side of like you go to west side of Lake Eyasi, down to the valley of Lake Eyasi there. So that's the place where the Hadza they are located. And the most of the place where they're living down the valley of Lakeasi and also Yaida Chini Valley to the savanna grasses. So that's the place where Hadza people we are living, and most of the time, like nowadays, right, you go to Ayasi, Beijing, they're living in the mountains, and some of them they live in small camps.
In fact, Shawnee just shared the regions where the Hadza community are living, and I think the most important part of what he shared is something that I think the popular media and even many scientific inquiries don't talk about, right? But the community themselves, they center this. So the population is roughly 1,000 people, 1,200, depends on the numbers you choose from the last Tanzania national census. Some members of the community still continue to hunt and gather for wild plants and animals. They don't keep livestock, they don't tend any farms or any garden plots. But as wild resources are increasingly narrowed, many members of the community, large groups, have moved into villages and mix some hunting and gathering with wage labor, or with, they receive government aid, as Shawnee just indicated. They receive donations from aid organizations. They work for researchers. They work as game scouts. They work as security guards for local farms. They engage in ethnotourism, which is a way to generate money for the group. But I think that the most significant aspect, there's my friend, now I see him on screen. The most I think important thing that Shawnee just mentioned is that this is, whenever I speak to any of my friends and colleagues and collaborators who are in the community, whether they live in a bush camp that's very remote or whether they live in a village or a city, they talk about the community as being very versatile, the community as being very resilient and occupying many different subsistence niches, not just hunting and gathering, because that's a very limited resource now due to climate change and population impaction. So,
well, I have a follow-up question really on the Hadzas. You know, I was brought up in Africa. I was in Tanzania in the 1960s, while the president, name of the president was Julius Nyerere, and the Ujamaa villages. So I saw some film or something that the Hadza, you know, the Ujamaa villages should be a socialist village where people cooperated and so forth. But I have read somewhere that the Hadzas were actually forced into these Ujamaa villages. And then when they were abandoned after Nyerere was not a president any longer and so forth, they abandoned those villages and returned to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle and so forth. Is it true? How was life under Julius Nyerere really? Can you say something about it, Shani?
I think from my experience, because I hear that news from my elders, you know, because in that time I never existed. So the things in Hadza people, they run away and go back to the bush and continue with their lifestyle, and because they are not being prepared, being forcibly with some few Hadzas who being trained with the government that you need this people to get out from the bush and to mix up together with any other communities. So idea is to share resources, to let them go to school, let them to stay in a village, let them to get medications, to let them to get water, like to civilize them, So the idea was failed because at that time the Hadza people they are not ready, they believe that lifestyle is not what their ancients told them to live. They are going beyond of their traditions of way of life. So and it also something which made them to go to the bush is because of the diseases, because they are mixed up with other people. And then the idea of the Nyerere was very polite. It's not like forcing them, but the people who represent them, they use more force, pushing the Hadza people. Some of them they go too far even to punish them. which is going to the beyond of the human rights. At the end of the day, when Nyerere realized that, no, we don't need to do it like this way. Let these people be. Let them, until themselves they realize that they want to go to school, we will provide a school. If they want to go to live in a village, we can make sure that we can help to find a good resources for them to live. And that's why until right now, the Hadzabe, they're still living in free their places. And also it seems like they are abandoned. The government never care about them anymore.
This question you asked is a really important question, the one we just talked about with settlement attempts. Shawnee wrote a paper in his law program. Shawnee holds a master's degree in Indigenous Peoples Law and Policy from the University of Arizona in the United States. And so he knows very much about the history of these settlement attempts, but he's a humble person, so he will not talk about the fact that he has this degree. So I would like the readers to know that this is something that he knows very much about. And he jumped in on the question talking about the attempts that were made, which is actually the third attempt at settlement, was the one that Julius Nyerere made in the 1970s. That was the third. Shawnee and I were tasked as part of the work we do with Olanakwes Community Fund of looking at the history of settlement attempts. And he did all sorts of interviews with elders in the community on the other attempts that had been made. The first one was there's some rumors that there was a settlement attempt in 1927, but the first one that's documented was 1939, when British colonial authorities forcibly settled the Hadza community. That was the first one. The second attempt was in 1964. It was led by the Tanzanian government and was facilitated by missionaries from the American Church of God. And the third attempt was part of Nyerere's Ujamaa. And so I also think that Shawnee's point is so well taken. It was not by force, but part of the post-colonial African socialist ideology. And so this is so relevant to our lives together and the work we're doing, because this is where Ndamaga was created, which is a place where there was a school, there were multiple houses, there was a dispensary, piped drinking water for the first time. Anyway, all these things happened under Nyerere. And then when the Hadza returned, when they decided that they did not want to be settled, and Nyerere essentially supported their decision to move back into the bush, it was in the mid-1970s, and after Nyerere was no longer in power, that the Tanzanian government then took away all legal right to hunt on their land. But because they had built that facility, that's now the facility where the village and the school, where Shawnee does so much of his work in the community, is happening. So
yeah, my next question there is what do you think is the main challenges really for the Hadza people? If you look today, what are the main issues as you see it, Shani?
Yeah, I think the main challenge for the Hadza nowadays is we run out of the resources right now. It's because everything's gone. We have a few resources because most of the life of Hadza we depend for the nature to get everything from the environment. But right now the environment is gone because of the population is increasing, and also our animal keepers, people like Hadzabe and our others neighbors, they are coming closer and closer to the place where the Hadza we're using to get our natural resources. So, and also climatic change also is one of the main reasons, because environment is changing. People right now, they are looking for landy, especially for agriculturality and also pastorality. So, and that's the big issues, for us. We have been suffering a lot, and to reduce at least our challenges which we've been facing for every single day. And then, and then I was like, hey, education is very important for this community, because we cannot tell them Hadza right now to go to do farming or to keep animals. They have no idea at all how they're gonna do that, how they're gonna do in the farming. Although the government provides, sometimes other people provide others stuff to support in the community, but still. And also the land has become a challenge. Even if now can provide everything, for instance, in us there, if you can provide like everything there, like you give them maybe tools of doing farmings, they don't have their farms. All their farms are taken with other people. So they're living in mountain where the place are not very friendly to do farming or to do any business. So yeah, that's why we see education is only things it's going to save this community for their better future.
Education, primary education, is compulsory in Tanzania. So what this means is that the children are going to be going to school. They're going to be going to these primary schools. The difference is that children from the Hadza community go without any extra money, without basic school supplies, without funding for safe transportation, without shoes, without a uniform. And so what ends up happening is that marginalization continues in the school setting, which makes it almost impossible for children to succeed. So one of the things when I first came to Shawnee and I said, I want to change the type of research that I'm doing, Hadza women had come repeatedly for years and years and years and said, we need to work on education. And so when Olanakwes Community Fund started, it was born out of me wanting to help facilitate something because the community was asking me to do so. But Shawnee has really been a huge proponent of education because he himself went from living in this very rural area and making it all the way through primary school, secondary school, a university education, a US master's degree. He's now in law school in Dar es Salaam. So I think part of this also why I was so interested in supporting this initiative and trying to do everything I could to help is Shawnee's excellent point that he just made at the end right there, which is without education, without literacy, without knowing how to speak English, it makes it almost impossible to continue to fight for land rights and to have a seat at the table. So Shawnee, again, he's so humble, he won't say, but in the last year, I will speak for you, Shawnee, if you don't mind, because I know you don't like to talk about all the big things you're invited to do, but I'm so proud of you that I want to talk about the big things you were invited to do. He was invited by the Tanzanian Ministry of Communication and Information Technology to a meeting with the World Bank, with he and other members of the community, where he actually brought members of his community to the table for the very first time. And also the UN General Assembly adopted the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in 2007, but there were some kind of holes in the way this worked for foraging communities. And so Shawnee was invited through the work with Olanakwes Community Fund to submit a case study on the education initiatives he just talked about. So he's doing so much, actually, not only but for the world, but I know Shawnee so much, and he'll always take the airtime to talk about the needs of the children as opposed to discussing his own work that's being done. So I just wanted to thank my friend for that and publicly for the work he's doing there.
Okay, I have a question for you, Alisa. So what were the most important things that you learned when you lived with the Hadza as an anthropologist? What made impression on you?
Oh, that's such a tough question. Thank you. Well, I think it's very different now. You know, when I started, I was very young. I was very unaware of the tension that existed between the community and the nation state. I was very, I thought about my responsibility as a scientist in a very different way than I do now. Initially, when I first spent time in the community, I lived there for very extended periods of time in Hadza camps over many, many years. The biggest thing I have to say for me personally that impacted me was seeing the way that children are raised and seeing how capable children are in small scale societies like this, like the Hadza. And it really has not only impacted my life as a researcher who studies childhood and kind of distributed childcare and motherhood and parenting, but it's also impacted the way that I parent my own child. So I think seeing the way that children are reared in this community has been the most impactful experience for me personally, initially, certainly, and now that's continued. I also think now with 18 years of looking back, I think the most important thing for me as an anthropologist is I'm very struck by the strength of the community in terms of resilience to ecological, social, and political change. And I think far too often we talk about foraging communities as being locked in time, and that foraging communities need to stay right where they are, and that we need to somehow build this kind of invisible barrier around foraging communities so they can continue to hunt and gather, without the true appreciation that this is a human rights issue. For individuals who want to continue hunting and gathering, they should have the land and the territory to do so. when it's possible, based on climate change and defaunation and all sorts of ecological variables, for those who want to leave the bush to pursue an education, to become a lawyer, to become a doctor, to become a politician, what have you, a teacher, they should have the ability to do so and have the same rights and access that every other member of every other, you know, national citizen of Tanzania should have. And so I think for me, the biggest thing I've taken away is that this is a human rights issue, and that individuals and communities need to have the power to decide for themselves what makes the most sense, not have anyone from the outside dictating that. And I thank Shawnee so much for inviting me into his family, into his life. We actually, there's one little funny anecdote during lockdown, when it was the shelter in place order in the United States, when COVID-19 pandemic hit in early 2019, Shawnee was finishing up his graduate program in Arizona. I live in Nevada, so we were nearby. And Shawnee came and stayed, spent time with my family during the lockdown. And it was at my dining room table where we put our heads together and said, how can we kind of join forces to do something like this? And it was Shawnee's unwavering dedication to his community and to education. I still can't believe all the paperwork went through in the middle of the pandemic. Like, we were worried about how we were even going to get enough money to file the paperwork. We were talking constantly all day long, like, this is never going to happen. And then it actually did happen. So I think this has been one of the best parts of my life as an anthropologist, but it actually has nothing to do with my scholarship and everything to do with my continued relationship with Shawnee and with the community. So that's my answer.
Okay, I was wondering a little bit as a follow-up question. We made another program with a researcher who spoke about egalitarianism among hunter and gatherers. We're talking about New Era and egalitarianism, but hunter-gatherers also have a different kind of egalitarianism sometimes. Is it something that characterizes the Hadza people, or did you thought about that and so on? As a follow-up, yeah. Yes,
I can answer. So yeah, the concept of egalitarianism is often associated with hunting and gathering communities around the world, and across time. So across kind of temporal and geographic space. Historically, and I can let Shawnee speak to this also, it's his community, but a lot has been written in the ethnographic record about egalitarianism in this community, where women essentially, where there are no headmen, there are no big chiefs, and women have equal decision-making power to men. So yes, that's been well documented. One thing that I have learned from Shawnee that I think has been very valuable, and I have gone into the community now and women have approached me privately to talk about this. One of the other kind of pillars other than education for Olanakwes Community Fund, and Shawnee mentioned this earlier when he was speaking about our initiatives, the other pillar is economic empowerment of women via artisanship and financial literacy. So what's happening now as times are changing is women are losing they're losing kind of social standing and political decision making within the community as the economy, the Hadza economy, moves more and more towards a wage labor economy, and as outsiders increasingly are asking communities to pick a headman, to pick a big man, so that the kind of Western economic principles, as tourism's coming into these small spaces, these small residential units, outsiders are asking them, well, who's the chief? Who's the headman? And so now it's incumbent upon the community to say, this is so-and-so's camp, or this is so-and-so's camp. And so that then becomes the person who takes all the money. That becomes the person who makes all the choices of distribution. And so, this is what happens when you have many different ethnic groups and different political and social systems coming together. You have changes. This is not unanticipated, but it does mean for women that they are now reporting over and over again, not only just to anthropologists, but also to aid organizations, to government representatives. They're reporting that their own status is lowering, and that what would be quite useful would be some type of education whereby they get formal training on dealing with currency, so that they too can experience these new opportunities that a cash economy would afford. So that's my answer for egalitarianism, is that yes, they're an egalitarian community historically, but with the influx of new relationships and new guiding economic principles, that may be changing. But Shawnee, what do you think about egalitarianism?
I think you answered everything, but I want to add a little bit things. I think nowadays, because of this, new world, people creating these ideas of leadership and also creating like to have somebody who can lead the others, like to control everything, and as a leader. But now it's not like a leader, especially for what Alicia say. Most of the came to the Hadza, there are some of the few, men that take control everything. It's like if you have a power, it seems like you're stronger, and then they say you're going to be a leader. You are not even choosing with the community themselves. It's ideas, as Alicia say, from others people who come in there and they try to change the lifestyle or tradition of the community. That's also happening there in the other chain when the government try to tell them you must have a chairman, you must have a secretary, you must have somebody who can be able to speak up, like it represented you, and then the biases started there. People start to create the classes. The men, they start to take over, to take everything, to control the family. Men start to be a voice, among others. The women, when it comes in terms of the decisions, the women also they do, but for what I mean experiencing, it's decreasing, every single day. Men, they are adapted the lifestyle, which is not part of our life, it's part from others communities. Like they want to be, they want to show themselves they are the men, they have the power, they can do everything they want to do. And then when it come up with the Olanakwes community, the idea is to bring a level equally, let women to have their own voice like a previous. We want them to continue to be a main key within the family, within the community itself, not like to seem like they're inferior. So Olanakwes, we do that. We are not yet like doing that, but we're looking for future. If we're going to get a lot more fund, people from different donors, we will still empower the women, because we are scared, maybe tomorrow the women of the Hadza, they're going to be very, very bad, because the men now, they are becoming very terrible. Some of them are fighting women, some of them they are even beating them, which has never been happening before. Even women try to contribute something, to make some decision which is very positive within the family or within the community. The men say, "Yeah, you're the women, sit," So now with those elements, we start to see them within the community, especially in meetings. Although they are speaking, we are listening to them what they are speaking, but there are some small element. We are scared maybe in the next 2 years, the women will be voiceless.
In Sweden, we have this also an indigenous people called this the Samis. And they have a different kind of organizations, they're organized and so forth. And I wonder, how is it with the Hadza? Is there any signs of organization, spokespeople, and so forth? That's my question also.
Can I repeat that question again? I didn't get it.
Okay. I wonder, is there any beginning of an organization, or have you been planning for an organization for the Hadza somehow, that they are organized politically to change things systematically and so forth, choosing some kind of representative in that way, or is it something like that?
Yeah, I think the main problem is that the Hadza, because most of us we are not educated, to compare with the other communities. So finding a way to organize ourselves, like to come together and also find the solutions, to try to go to looking for solution for some other dispute to happen within the community, like going to the government or going to the people who we think maybe they're going to help us. You know, the reason is that we are not educated more. The Hadza, they are not educated a lot. Most of us, we are living in our nature, we live in our own life. So there's a few Hadzas who at least they reach certain level of education, like in in a secondary school or maybe in college, you know, but they are still living in the bush. Those are the Hadza who at least they are tried, but they're not for themselves. They are the other power from others private organizations who've been leading with the Maasai people like UCRT, Pingozi, and any others organizations who they are not organizations for Hadza. You know, those are the organizations from others group of the community who come in there and try to tell to organize Hadza, you know, to know their rights, how to fight things, how to find their rights, how to go in this office, how to speak also with the government leaders, you know, how to find a solution of others problem happens, you know. So I think this is one of the big problems we have. So right now we have a pastor like a Shani, and also we have some few Hadzas maybe they're in universities, you know. So these educated people, when they come together, that's going to be easier, at least to fight, to organize with the communities and come together, organize meetings, and also finding the solution to go to the government, you know, to asking for any help, you know, the government. So yeah, you know, I think for me it's that's because, you know, most of the Hadza we are not educated that time. That's why it's been difficult to organize ourselves. And we say we live in our own life. We are in the bush here. We don't need any problem. We don't need any war. You know, like any other political activists people doing.
Can I add something, Shawnee? Just about this, would that be okay? So one thing that I think it might be helpful for your audience to know, the Hadza community is only roughly 1,000 individuals. So it's a very different situation for the Sami, who are spread across multiple countries with a population of roughly 80,000 people, with parliament, you know, representation in multiple European countries. So I think population size matters. And I think, to Shawnee's excellent point, education matters, which is why the education initiative is not coming from the outside of the Hadza community. The initiative for children to be supported when they go to school is coming from within the community. This is driven by the community's desire for their children to have access to education, so that eventually maybe this representation could happen. So I think I'm always asked, you know, as an anthropologist, to talk about indigenous communities and indigeneity and essentially human rights I'm a bioethicist also, and so I'm really thinking about ethical research practices all the time. And one of the things that always strikes me is we particularly in Western context now, we talk a lot about indigeneity, and we talk about the significance of supporting and uplifting indigenous communities without maybe understanding what that means country by country. So Shawnee's the one who taught me, who educated me, that the country of Tanzania does not have a special designation for indigenous peoples. So they have 165 different ethnic groups who identify as indigenous. So I also think part of this is kind of national support for this type of grassroots movements in indigenous communities. And I don't know what the Tanzanian government is prepared to do in order to facilitate some of this sovereignty movement that's kind of, you know, driven by the community. But I just wanted to make a point about population differences too, because it's a different process without national and international support, and without money for education, and being a small group. So it's our movements are huge, right? What we do, we spend so much time doing like these little things that maybe don't look like a lot from the outside, but Shawnee's doing so much just by being a law student, just by the pure fact that he's going to have his law degree is a huge win, you know, for the whole community. So.
Right. Can I ask about the organization again? Also, would it be possible to support the organization, the Olanakwes Fund, from outside, and would that be important in some way?
Shawnee, I say yes. What do you say? I mean, yes, it's possible
Yes,
logistically. But Shawnee, why would you want to convince our friends in Sweden to support this initiative?
I think, I want you to start first.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. Yes, we have a website. We have several fundraising initiatives that we work on throughout the year. So it's our website is www.olanakwe.org, OLANAKWE. Oh, we should also say what that means, Shawnee. Can you tell what does Olanakwe mean? We should say that first.
The Olanakwes means children.
It
That's the
means
meaning of
children.
Olanakwes.
Yeah, it means children in Hadzabe. So the community, there were a lot of different names thrown around, and Shawnee and I kept saying, "Oh no, it can't be that. Oh no, we can't call that. It has to be something that that everybody agreed on, right?" So here's the fun part of a mutual aid organization. Everybody has to agree on all this stuff. So Olanakwes Community Fund. Olanakwes means children, and you can donate through our website. You can donate through PayPal. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So it's a registered nonprofit organization that's registered in the United States, but we are fully operational and have all of our permitting in order to operate in Tanzania. So we're an international aid organization that operates in Tanzania, where the community has access to all of the funds and makes the essentially does all of the work on the ground. So it's community members supporting community members, which makes it a bit of a different type of organization that's working with the community. So it's a mutual aid organization as opposed to a nonprofit where it's individuals from outside the community coming in and doing everything on the ground. Is that, Shawnee, what else did I miss?
I think you take everything. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Shawnee's the person in Tanzania who's, the director in country, who's making a lot of these decisions. But it's a group effort. I mean, there's all sorts of people in the country who are working really hard in order to do all of this for the children, there. One of the things we're working on right now, we have been very, very successful. We have managed to totally redo 2 buildings, which per our earlier conversation, some of the buildings that the children were in had not been updated since Julius Nyerere built the school. And so the schools had not had an upgrade since the early 1970s, and the classroom was literally, I don't think I'm exaggerating, Shawnee, I think this is true. The school was falling down around the children. So, and Shawnee was there. He was actually there on the roof of the school helping install solar panels. So we're working on that for one of the primary schools, and we're now starting an initiative where we're moving to the other primary school that's on the other side of kind of the Lake Yasi Basin, where Hadza children go to school, that has not had any upgrades since it was built, also in the late 60s. So a lot of upgrades need to happen. They're still on coal. They don't have basic school supplies. We're working on things like cutlery and dishes for food, and helping to safe transportation is always one. And I know less about that. Shawnee's the one who organizes all of that. I just do all the paperwork in the US and help fundraise, but Shawnee's in charge of how all of this actually works in the community. So Shawnee, what do you want to share about the kind of plans for the second school that we're working on right now? People might want to see.
As you say, I think we have a lot of challenges, especially how to support those children, who they need our help. They need help in general, because even right now in the Maka Primary School, yet we have more than 200 children. They have no uniform anymore. We managed to give them a uniform, but it's still, because when they go back to the holiday, they use those uniform as a home clothes and also school clothes. At the end of the day, they finish it. So and also they don't have a shoes, because those shoes they already throw them away when they go back home. So I think they need uniform so much. They need shoes. They need also clothes for changing. That's the main issues which they are really suffering for that. And also because I've been keep talking with our student coordinator, he always updated me about the children in the primary school. Yeah, to be honest, they need help. They need a uniform. They need also exercise books, notebooks, pens, and they also need soap for washing their clothes. Yeah, and also they need bag for putting their exercise books. Yeah, and also things. Yeah, I think that's the only thing the most they wanted. But in the Yedachin also, when we went over there, we found the children's that school, they are sleeping on the floor. No bed, no mattresses at all. Mattresses are too old. It's not even a shuka also is too old shuka. Some of them they're already not good for children. And also blankets are too old, and we've been asking the mwalimu, I mean the teachers, how's that, how these children living like this? It's easier for them to be contaminated with the diseases. And they say, yeah, we already proposed for the government, we didn't see any help. We proposed also for the some private organization about it. We didn't see any help. So yeah, and also we found also in the dormitories, because the boarding school, there's no light, so they need light. And also we found in a place where they are cooking food, they don't have enough dishes, they don't have enough plates, so yeah, to be honest, they really are suffering a lot. And also I had a meeting with the parents back in the bush there when I went. I've been found a lot of women's, and also the Hadza, they're asking for help for their kids. They need the uniform, they need lights, they need clothes, they need even transport, because right now the children's age of the 6 years old, 7 years old, walking from the school all the way to the camp, which took more than 14 kilometers, 12 kilometers. It's too dangerous for them. Yeah.
Shawnee, can I tell two success stories of our fundraising?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to tell the soccer story, but first I'll tell the secondary school, because this is really exciting. This just happened. So we had we did a Giving Tuesday fundraiser. So that's in the U.S. It's a day where people can donate to their favorite organizations. And Shawnee and I did a fundraising campaign to get these 4 Hadza kids to secondary school, and we had nothing. We had nothing, and so we just did this big fundraising campaign. And all 4 of them are now successfully in secondary school, and we were able to buy all their supplies and make sure to send them and do everything they needed. And it was really particularly exciting because one of the students is a young woman who is so thrilled, and she made it into a wonderful, the Maasai Girls School, a wonderful secondary school that's really competitive. And so there was a lot of support behind her, because in general, so few young women, so few girls in Tanzania have the opportunity to go to secondary school and have the opportunity to go to such a high quality secondary school. So a big initiative is education for girls. So we're really pleased, but all 4 are doing really well. And Shawnee spoke of our education coordinator, Delali, Shopo, Julius, and Daya, and Shopo is doing such great work, and he's making sure that everybody's okay, because all of the kids, the 3 boys that went to secondary school, had to live in a house with the matron now to kind of facilitate their education. So that's a good success story. The second thing that we have been able to do that is really fun, again, I know somewhat more about these particular initiatives because the funding came from the US. We also had some really generous donors, some friends of Olanakwes Community Fund, who facilitated essentially soccer nets, soccer balls. So football is a huge game in the country, all over the world, of course, as we know. And this school in Damago, where Hadza children go, is not only just Hadza children, it's children from all sorts of ethnic groups from across the region, many of them marginalized kind of in their own home country. And soccer, the headmaster noted that soccer, so coming together and playing football, was a way that children from these different ethnic groups from across social boundaries were learning to communicate and support one another, and most importantly, have fun. They got to be kids, but they didn't have soccer balls, they didn't have nets, they didn't have jerseys, they didn't have whistles, they didn't have anything. So Shawnee and everybody there on the ground went to the school and sat down and said, okay, what do you need? And it was so fun, and they were so thrilled, and even the teachers started playing. So it was actually, we're really trying to keep that as well, just because it's so important. It's so important for mental health and well-being and physical education, and it's really important for kids to just be able to go kick a soccer ball with their friends, you know. But all of this requires money. All of this requires support. And so we're also trying really hard to make sure that the soccer program can stay. And Shawnee's a good soccer player himself. And I know that he also has been really key in making sure that the kids get to do these fun things too.